Mashing up video game genres is nothing new. We've seen shooters mixed with RPGs, and somehow we even got a Tetris game mixed with Battle Royale. Give it time and we'll probably get a first-person Metroidvania graphic novel with match-3 mechanics and a roguelite. And I'm here to tell you that's not a bad thing. When Sparklite is firing on all cylinders, it'll tempt you over and over to explore its procedurally generated environments, level up its red-headed heroine, and defeat the game's tricky bosses. Despite a world that never realizes a satisfying level of complexity, and even with a few rough edges, which I'll talk about at the end of this video, there's a game here worth discovering, particularly if you want to feel challenged and rewarded without ever feeling punished or exhausted. I reviewed Sparklite on the PS4, and I want to thank Merge Games for providing the review code. And with that, let's get into it. Sparklite takes place in Geodia, a world powered by a mineral called, you guessed it, Sparklite. And as you might predict, a greedy overlord has harnessed Sparklite for selfish gains, throwing the world into chaos. You take the role of Ada, a hero destined to restore order by activating a series of ancient symbols, each found in one of the game's 5 colorful biomes. These range from a poisonous blue and green swamp to the crumbled ruins of a sand-soaked desert. And as with the Zelda games, you'll discover items and abilities that enable you to unlock and explore these areas. Unlike Zelda, you'll have a robot drone named Wingnut by your side, who can dig up treasure and solve a few of the game's simple puzzles. And when I say simple, I mean it. You'll never have to think your way through Sparklite. Instead, the game is all about grinding for loot, which takes the form of Sparklite crystals, upgrading your loadout, and defeating enemies and bosses. As such, combat is a big part of the experience. You've got a basic attack, a charge attack, and a very useful dodge maneuver that also lets you leap over chasms. The controls are mostly tight, but there were a few times where Ada handled much better with the D-pad than with the analog stick, and in a very few instances, the hit detection felt just a little off. I would occasionally land a blow, then subsequent swings would miss, all without the enemy or my character moving an inch. Thankfully, this was infrequent enough that it was only a minor distraction, especially since most of the enemies are well designed, the best of which require unique strategies and quick reflexes. Adding an extra layer of depth to the combat are widgets, which are consumable buffs and items that you find scattered throughout the map. But before you can practice your combat skills or even explore the world, Sparklite quickly reveals its roguelite mechanics. Upon death, or rather after getting knocked unconscious, you lose all of your widgets and you're transported back to a floating village in the sky that acts as the game's hub world. It's here that you can spend your loot to either upgrade certain areas of the hub world, such as the shop, or purchase what the game calls patches, upgrades that you can equip and unequip to customize your loadout. One patch might provide you with extra health, while another might make your weapons more powerful. And unlike widgets, you never lose patches, so the improvements they provide are permanent. Furthermore, patches are relatively cheap and they're found regularly in the world below, so you'll have something shiny and new to equip after just about every run. In other words, few runs in Sparklite ever feel truly worthless. Once you've spent your loot and you're ready to head back down, you'll have to re-explore Geodia's biomes, which are procedurally regenerated each time out. Enemies, chests, and buried treasure all reappear, but what you're really looking for are the 3 types of dungeons located somewhere within each biome. Now, I say dungeons, but they're more like caverns or hideouts, as they're each very short, no more than 5 or 6 rooms, but they do each provide their own challenge. First are furnaces, where you'll find heavily guarded chests containing one of the game's more powerful patches. Then there are vaults, which require you to solve a simple puzzle to obtain one of the game's special items that can help access new areas and execute new attacks. Unfortunately, only about half of these items ever proved very useful. Sure, it was rewarding when a new item granted access to a previously inaccessible area, but it was disappointing when that item was never used again, at least along with Ada's abilities, but it just never happened. The last. It's in defeating these bosses that the real challenge of Sparklite becomes apparent, and it's when I had the most fun. Each Titan will defeat you on at least your first few tries, but they never felt cheap and their patterns and vulnerabilities are all thoughtfully crafted. Even when I got utterly destroyed, my path to victory was always clear, and when I failed, it was always my fault. As a result, I rarely felt frustrated or outmatched. Once you do defeat a Titan, it's on to the next biome to take in the new environment, battle more dangerous enemies, and face off against the next Titan. It's a relatively simple gameplay loop that you'll have mostly experienced after clearing the first area. With no major gameplay elements introduced thereafter, it falls on the process of grinding for loot, upgrading your character, and defeating Titans to keep things interesting. And for the most part, this works, save for a few hours in the middle of the game that began to feel a tad repetitive. But this lull in pacing was fleeting, as the third and final act of the game ramps up the difficulty at just the right clip. Without spoiling anything, I'll just say that overcoming the final challenge took probably 4 of the 15 to 20 hours it took for me to finish the entire game. And when the end was in sight, I wanted nothing more after each defeat than to score some loot, tweak my loadout, and try again. That's the sign of a good roguelite. One last part about the gameplay I want to mention is the co-op. A friend can take control of your robot sidekick, but unfortunately it's just not that fun, at least not for player 2. It would have been nice if they could have helped with the combat, but alas, they're only able to scoop up treasure and help solve puzzles. If you're looking for an awesome couch co-op experience, I'd look elsewhere, especially if you're playing on Switch, which has plenty of other couch co-op experiences. So that pretty much sums up everything gameplay-wise, but remember how I mentioned at the top of this video that Sparklite had a few rough edges? While I don't want to call it glitchy, the game runs well. I did encounter a few minor bugs that, more than anything, show an overall lack of polish. Occasionally a chest wouldn't open, or a random shadow would appear out of nowhere, or the price of a new item wouldn't update in the store. In one instance, I couldn't talk to a character until I got lucky and walked to just the right random spot on the screen, and then I could strike up a conversation. I want to reiterate that most of these bugs on their own wouldn't even warrant a mention. The game never broke, and I still had a ton of fun. Again, I reviewed Sparklite on PS4, so if you're playing on PC, Xbox, or Switch, you might want to check out some reviews for those versions as well. If I was scoring Sparklite on gameplay alone, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's not overly deep, but that's part of the charm. It's refreshing to find a roguelite that's challenging and rewarding without ever feeling unfair or overly complex, even if it can feel slightly monotonous. If you're looking for a combat-focused, top-down adventure that features a fun loot grind and a lovely 16-bit aesthetic, this game is worth a look. That said, the numerous bugs can't be ignored, so I'm giving Sparklite a final score of 7.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this entire video. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. And if you want to see what I'm playing, or just keep up with me in general, follow me on Twitter and Instagram.